Hey guys, welcome back to releasethecraftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. And you guys, if you were just joining me, thanks for joining my channel. Like, welcome, subscribe, like, do the things. I have a Patreon, check that out. All those things. Self-promotion, self-promotion, self-promotion. Here we go. If you do not know, Storycraft is where I tell you guys a story, and I do a craft. So, today I'm doing a craft, as you guys can see, and I'm going to tell you guys a story about Rumpelstiltskin, because I asked you guys last week about stories that had to do with little, like, elves and elvish type people, and Rumpelstiltskin came up, and surprisingly, I have not done that on this channel, although I am 100% convinced that a Priscilla in a different universe absolutely did it, because I have the utmost sense of deja vu when it comes to telling this story, but I didn't. I haven't actually told you guys the story, so I'm going to tell you now. And we're just going to jump right into it. Because you guys may be pretty familiar with Rumpelstiltskin already. I don't think this is going to be anything new for you, but it's still a pretty fun story. So, way off in the way long ago, we have a miller and his daughter. And one day, the miller, who is a little bit in his cups because the mill business is not doing so hot right now, you know, like agriculture is down, so there's no grain to mill, finds himself before the king, because the king wants to know, like, what's the status, what's going on down there, what's happening in my kingdom. I want to get this like economy under control. So the miller, who's a little tipsy, starts talking to the king, and he's like, yeah, I don't actually have anything to tell you. I haven't been grinding a lot of stuff in my mill, so yeah. And the king's like, well, that's not gonna work. Like, that doesn't do anything for anybody. How are you making money? How are you living? And at this point, the miller realizes that he might be in a little bit of danger here if he doesn't have a good answer to give to the king. So he's like, oh, well, you know, like, we're fine, my king. Like, I'm set. Like, I don't even need to worry about money, honestly. And the king's like, well, why don't you need to worry about money? I'm the king. I need to worry about money. So, like, what makes you so special? And the miller's like, oh, well, you see, what had happened was, I have this daughter, right, and she's really golden. She's golden, because what the king didn't know was that this drunk fool is trying to tell the king that he has a beautiful daughter with gold hair, but he cannot get the words together. He can't get that straight. He can't get that out right. And all he keeps saying is that I have a daughter, and she's an excellent spinner and a weaver, and she does all sorts of things like gold. You know, she's very golden. Everything she touches turns to gold, essentially, you know, especially the things that she spins. And the king's like, wait a minute, are you telling me that you don't worry for money because your daughter can spin flax into gold? And he's like, well, those weren't the words I said. And the king's like, no, I've heard enough. I have heard enough. And at this point, the miller's like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. He's gonna kill me for lying, for saying some crazy stuff. And he's like, bring your daughter to me immediately. I want to see this for myself. And so the miller is like, oh, I'm in the clear. Okay, no big deal. I'm gonna be fine. So he goes back home, tells his daughter, and he's like, hey, kiddo, hey, I don't know if you know this. I don't think the word may have gotten to you yet, but I may have been hanging out with the king, as I do. I'm a very important miller. And she's like, Dad, you're the only miller. And he's like, yeah. So, the king, maybe is a little bit interested in you. And she's like, oh my god, like, why would the king be interested in me, Papa? Like, why? And he's like, well, you see, what had happened was, I had told the king about how beautiful and talented you were, and I may have told him that you could spin straw into gold. And she says, what? Say that again? And he goes, oh, you know, like I was telling him about all your talents and how you're great at baking and you're a wonderful weaver and maybe you could spin straw into gold. And she's like, again, one more time, I just really didn't hear that. And he goes, I told the king that you can spin straw into gold. And she was like, what? I can't do that, though. And he's like, yeah, so about that, you're going to have to go to the castle and show the king that you can do this, and you got to go right now. There's actually guards waiting outside for you to take you back to the castle. And she's like, say what? I can't do that though, Daddy. Like, what am I supposed to do? And at this point, the guards come in and they're like, hey, like, what's the holdup? And let's come get your daughter and show her off to the king. And Miller's like, oh, here she is. She's right here. This is my daughter. Because, you know, he's a cool guy. He's a cool guy. And the guards end up taking the girl who has no name back to the king's palace. And they present her to the king. And the king's like, hey, I heard that you can spin flax and straw into gold. So I actually happen to have a room full of straw and a spinning wheel. So get it done. I'm going to leave you here all night and I'll come back in the morning and this better be gold. Otherwise I'm going to execute your father. And maybe you. Because you guys are liars. And she's like, wait, I didn't lie. I didn't say anything. And they lock her into the room. So she's now in the room and she tries, you know, she gives it her good old like college try, little honest effort as she's putting it in, trying to see if she can turn this straw into gold. And obviously she can't. And she's a little bit upset. Like, who wouldn't be in this situation? So she starts crying, like absolutely sobbing, because she doesn't know how she's going to pull this off. Her father's going to die. She's probably going to die. And she doesn't know what to do. There's no way out. The room is locked. There's no windows. And then suddenly she hears this little chuckle behind her and she turns around and there's a little man. A little man with a little beard and a little pointy hat. And she's like, what the fuck is this? And he's like, hey, I saw that you were crying. What's going on? And she's like, oh, well, the king's going to execute me and my dad if I don't turn all this straw into gold. And I have to spin it into fine golden thread or something. And he's like, oh, is that all? I don't know why you would cry so hard about that. And she's like, because I can't do it. That's why. And he's like, oh, well, I could do it for you if you wanted me to. But what would you give me? And she's like, can you really do it? And he's like, yeah, I totally can do it. Totally. I'm really good at this kind of stuff. And so she's like, well, I do have a necklace from my mother that I could give to you. And he's like, perfect, fork it over. So she hands over her mother's necklace. And he's like, take a nap. Like, get some rest. You look so tired. You got those big old bags under your eyes. And she's like, thanks, I've been sobbing for hours. And he's like, yeah, I know. You look like shit, though. And so she's like, okay, cool. So she goes to bed in a pile of the straw. And when she wakes up in the morning, everything is gold. The little man did what he said. And when the king walks in, he's like, what the heck is... This is all gold. This might solve our kingdom's money problems. And she's like, well, as you can see, I did it, and now I'm going to go home. And the king's like, actually, I have another room of straw for you. It's crazy, but you're going to have to do it again. So yeah, so they move her to the different room, lock her in there with all the spinning stuff, and she's like, are you kidding me? And she sits there and she tries. The spinning wheel didn't get enchanted overnight. There's no way for her to do it, so she does what she can do in this situation, and she sits down and starts sobbing. And then she feels a little tap on her shoulder, a little tap, 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 and there's the little man again, except for this time he has a fancy tri-pointed hat, and he's like, hey... Why so glum, chum? And she's like, hey, I'm gonna get executed if I can't turn this room of straw into gold. And I don't know if you've noticed, it's actually twice as big as the first room. And he's like, I did notice that this was a bigger room. We are, in fact, in a different room with more straw. I noticed that. What a predicament. I mean, you want me to hook you up again? Like, I got the connection. I got the tricks to make this happen. And she's like, yeah, I actually would love that. I really would love to not get executed for the checks that my father wrote that I can't cash. And he's like, yeah, I got you, but... You know, it is kind of a market economy, and I can't really be fussed to do things for free. You know, I don't really work for exposure. At which point the girl's like, hey, I have a ring from my mom. Will that do? Will you take that? And he's like, yeah, actually, I will. I would love to take that. So he takes the ring. And he's like, and again, girl, you look like trash. Like, what's your skincare routine like? Well, you're not doing it while you're here. I don't understand, because you look awful. Take a nap. And she's like, yeah, I'm already going to bed. I'm done with this whole situation. I'm over it. So the girl goes to bed, and the little man spends all night spinning the straw into gold. So when she wakes in the morning, another room full of gold. And the king walks in, he's like, holy shit, look at this. You've just saved the kingdom from being like... broke from bankruptcy. Like, you've done it. You saved us. And she's like, great, fantastic. And don't just mind. I'm just going to squeeze past you here. I'm just going to go home. And he's like, actually, no. See, here's the thing. I have another room. And she's like, oh my God, tell me it's not full of straw. And he's like, it is in fact full of straw. And this is the crazy part. It's even bigger. And she's like, yeah, it's bigger. It's bigger than this room. Of course it is. Yeah. Can I get like a sandwich? And he's like, yeah, totally. Anything you want, honestly. Because I'm rich now, like I should be. And she's like, cool, I'm so glad for you. And so he brings her to the third room. And before locking her into that room, he's like, hey, same thing as the night before. Whole room, gold. Do it. Do your thing. But this time if you do it, I'll marry you. You can be queen. And she's like, wow, that's not anything I asked for. And he's like, yeah, no, but it's an honor, so feel honored, okay? So he shuts the door because he's thinking, why would I send my cash cow home? After 3 days, I should be married to this girl who can turn things into gold and be rich forever. And she's in there thinking like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm in this situation for a third night. And it's even worse because this freaking greedy asshole wants me to marry him at the end of it. Like, there's no winning. There's no escape. So, what does she do? She sits down and cries. And honestly, I don't blame her because either outcome is terrifying and awful to me. But she sits down and she cries. And there's that little coming from right behind her ear, and she's like, honestly, you could just introduce yourself and be like, hey, I'm here, like, I'm ready to make a deal, you don't have to do all this stuff. And he's like, well, no, I don't know what you're talking about. What you said just sounds weird and awkward. I don't think that's natural, like that's a natural way to enter a room at all. So little man is before her, and this time he has on a very fetching wig, and she's like, cool, so yeah, I'm in the same situation. And he's like, yeah, looks like it. Bigger room, huh? This kid's got lots of rooms just full of straw. That's so weird. And she's like, I know, right? So she's like, hey, can you help me maybe again? And he's like, well, you know my price. And she looks about her person and she's like, I actually only had those 2 valuables. That was everything I had. I don't actually have anything else. I was poor before I came here. So maybe you could just do it like on credit, like an IOU or something. Like, he's gonna marry me, I'm gonna be the queen, I'll be able to give you whatever you want once I'm the queen. And he's like, well, no. I already told you I don't work for exposure, and I definitely don't work for IOUs. I only work for cold, hard cash. Or your firstborn child. And she says, say that again? And he goes, cold, hard cash, or your firstborn child. And she's like, again, I didn't really hear that last part. And he goes, well, if you wanted me to, I would take your firstborn child off your hands for you in exchange for doing all this labor. And she's like, oh, well, I guess I am getting married, so it does stand to reason that I may have a child in the future. But in her head, she's like, there's no telling what's going to happen tomorrow with this crazy king, let alone like 9-10 months from now. I could be dead by then. As long as I get out of this situation, though, we're golden. So she's like, yeah, I agree. Totally cool. Let's do it. And so, she takes a nap. She doesn't even let this little man trash talk her. She's like, I'm already going to bed. Don't even tell me. I beauty sleep. I got it. So she's in bed. She wakes up in the morning. The whole giant room of straw is gold. And in fact, it's so much gold that the king actually honestly will never need her to spin straw into gold again, because they're going to be wealthy for like a millennia with how much gold is in this room. And when the king walks in, he's elated. He's like, oh my God, look at this. Holy shit, I don't even care that you're poor and you don't come from money or nobility. We're getting married right now. And she's like, oh, Joy, that's everything I really hoped for. I didn't just want to go home and like live my life or anything. You're right. So they're married. And it turns out, once like the stress of money is off the table, the king isn't actually so bad. In fact, he's kind of a sweet guy. He just seems to have a lot of financial anxiety. But once that got smoothed over, smooth sailing. They actually get along wonderfully. And it's not long before she actually gets pregnant. And at this point, she's like, oh shit, I fucked up. I have fucked up. I cannot give away the firstborn child of the king. He'll never forgive me. And like, what do I do? And the little man pops by and he's like, hey, I can't help but notice that you're pregnant there. Fantastic work. I love that you get right down to business. Just don't forget that I'm coming once that baby's born to pick it up. All right, bye. And she's like, wait. Is there like a way we could renegotiate this contract perhaps? Is there something I can do to like maybe replace a child in value to you? And he's like, no. It's in stone. It's in stone except if you really want to get out of this, like you really don't want to give up your baby, I don't know why you don't want to keep it, that's crazy, you could just give it to me. And she's like, no, I want to keep my baby, don't play around. And he's like, okay, all right. If you can guess my name before your baby's born, I'll let you get out of the deal. And so she's like, oh, just guess your name? Okay, yeah, I can do that, totally can do that. And he's like, yeah, totally, yeah, it's a really easy name, and everybody has it, so, like, honestly, you'll probably get it right now. So the queen does. She starts rattling off names. She's like Balthazar, Orpheus, Tom, Larry, Mo, and he's like, no, none of those are my name, actually. I'll come back tomorrow and see what you got. And so this carries on. For weeks, the queen is seeing the little man every morning. He appears before her, and he's like, well, what you got? And she's like, all right, I got my little notebook, my little pen and paper. And she's like, what about David? And he's like, no. Adam, no. Rodney, no. And then he leaves. And she's doing this every day. And every day she's getting closer and closer to her due date. And she's getting more and more frantic. So now she starts sending the servants out. Because she's like, I'm the queen, damn it. Like, we got to come up with a solution together. So she starts getting her servants. And she's like, go out there. Collect the names of every man in the kingdom. Every single person you come across, write their name down. You bring it to me. So every day, these servants are riding out, they're riding all over, they're accosting innocent men in the streets and being like, what's your name? Tell me your name, boy, for the queen. And they come back to her with a list of names, and every morning she's reading it to the little man, and she's like, hey, is it Susan? Are you a boy named Sue? Are you perhaps Sasha? And he's like, no, none of those are my name. And then he disappears in a flash, and she's like, oh my god, I'm freaking out, because she's getting closer and closer to her due date. And the king's like, man, my wife seems so agitated lately, but I'm not gonna ask her any questions about that. So she starts to do what she does best when she's stressed, and she starts crying. And the last messenger of the day comes, and the queen is about to pop. So she knows any minute now she's going to give birth, and it's going to be too late. The last messenger of the day comes to her. He hands her his list. He's like, ma'am, I can only find like 2 people I haven't talked to before. These are the names I found. But actually, while I was writing, I saw the craziest thing. And she's like, oh my god, I don't care about your story, but go on. And he's like, I happened to see this little man dancing about in the woods, and he kept talking about getting a baby and saying, like, she'll never get it, she'll never guess it, no one knows my name, I'm Rumpelstiltskin. And he was just dancing around delightfully. He had a crazy little beard, a wonky little hat, and it was just the craziest thing I've seen. And she was like, oh my god. Promotion. So she promotes the man, right? And then that morning, she can feel the contraction starting, you guys. It is now the final countdown. And she's like, oh my god, come on, little dude. Come on, come show up. And so she's clutching on for dear life. She's hanging in there. And the little man shows up to her in the morning, and he's like, well, I think today's the day I get my little baby. And she's like, wait, I still haven't given birth yet, so I still get to guess your name, right? And he's like, yeah, okay, go ahead. Whatever you got. Hit me with it. And she's like, okay, I've thought really hard about this. Could it be that your name is Murphy? And he's like, no, my name isn't freaking Murphy. That's crazy. I told you it was a very common name. And she's like, yeah, okay, what about Stan? And he's like, nope, that's not a common name. I've never even heard of that. Stan sounds ridiculous. I've never heard that name in my life. And then she's like, okay, I have one more, but I'm not sure, because could it be your name is Rumpelstiltskin? And at this point, the little man balks, and he looks at her and he's like, what did you say? And she says, Rumpelstiltskin, that's your name. And this little man gets so angry that he stomps his foot on the ground so hard that it drives his foot down, like all the way up to the knee into the solid stone. And then he grabs his other foot and he pulls himself apart. He rips himself in half. And that's the end of Rumpelstiltskin. He dies. And the queen gets to keep her son. The king had no idea what the heck was going on. And everyone lives happily ever after. And that's the end. That is the end of the story of Rumpelstiltskin. And honestly, you guys, it's hilarious. I love this story. And I'm really surprised that I have not told this story before. Because I love it. I think it's a great story. It's hilarious. It is so funny to me that he gets so frustrated at the end that he rips himself in 2 pieces because someone guessed his name. But yeah, it's a kind of a really good story about why you should not make deals with fae folk, because it will come back to bite you in the butt. Unfortunately for her, someone heard his name, so she managed to get out of that situation. And that's everything I have for you guys today. If you have a story about a funny little person, elvish or leprechaun or otherwise, that you would like me to tell this month, that seems to be my theme. And yeah, I'll tell it if you got it. So that's going to be it for me, guys. I appreciate your faces, and I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, guys, happy crafting. Bye!